So what you see here is not only SQL, but you also see PL/SQL. So when your performance issue is coming from a PL/SQL library, PL/SQL profiling may help. Okay? So just keep that in mind. So that was just a quick detour. So going back to the sample that I want to create a test case. I'm going to close everything here, and I'm going to go to samples. From samples, I'm going to open this one that says SQLT Qtune. And if I open any of these files, let's say I open this one that says extract. What do I find on extract? I find all these files, and I open the main report, and I can see some SQL text here, right? Now let's say this file is coming from where? This file is coming from a Linux machine, which is an 11203. Let's say I want to create a test case, and I want to be able to reproduce on my test case one of these execution plans. Usually when I'm trying to reproduce one of these execution plans, it's going to be the worst performing plan, which in this case, I want to reproduce this 9 to 5 plan. I want this on my system. Right now, this file, let's assume it's coming from a customer. So I say, okay, how do I take this execution plan and put it on my system? Because I want to play with this. How do I do that? Well, the way to do this, I open the README. Not this one. Let me open the README for this file. It's closing some files here. I open the README, and it says, if I want to implement a SQLT test case, those are the steps. And the steps, first thing it's doing here is going to say, unzip this TC file. So I look for that TC file, TC, which is here, unzip this file. Step number 1 is taken care of. Now, I need to run SQL Plus, right? So for me to run SQL Plus, I'm just going to copy over these areas over here. And I'm going to open SQL Plus. Fine. I am inside my test case. So what is next here? It's saying you unzip, you go to that directory, and you execute express.sql. Keep in mind, all I want is to be able to bring over this test case to my local laptop. And this file was created some other place, different database, different server, different everything. So I come here and say, express. It says we have to go through 7 steps. First step, I'm going to create a test case user. Do I want a suffix? I say no, I don't want a suffix. What you see there is the metadata to create all the objects behind this SQL. Everything was valid except the package, which is fine in this case. I tried to purge the 53240 from my system. It purged it. Now it's trying to import the repository. The repository includes no application data, it's only metadata. It's going to map the statistics to my new objects. Everything was mapped correctly, I can see that here. It's going to set up the system statistics. It's going to set up the CView environment with a lot of alteration commands. So it's going to mimic whatever environment I have on the source system. And then it says, I am ready to execute the test case.
It overrides all these objects in the current system?
Yes, but the objects, they have a schema name. The schema name is going to be TC and the name of the statement. So in this case, if I'm working with a statement, the statement is 53240, then I have a new user that is called TC 53240 that contains all these objects that you see here, all the metadata, and the plan that I wanted to reproduce was this one here. Look at this number, 9 to 5. Look at this execution plan. Now, look what I did here, 9 to 5, and look at the execution plan. It is the same. So I was able to create a test case on my local database out of the metadata that came with SQLT. Is that clear? It's like magic, right? Black magic. Yeah, so now I can work with this issue because let's say here I have everything, right? Well, I don't have the data, but I have everything else. Let's say for some reason I want to reproduce, not this plan, but I want to try to reproduce this plan. Well, this plan that you see here, if I open the outline here, what do you see? That is the plan, right? So I can use this outline on a copy of the SQL that I have from your system and get that plan and do whatever I want. I have my test case, now I can play. Go ahead.
Is import going to create a data dictionary object, or it will import the table as well as the actual rows also?
No rows, no data.
Only the data dictionary.
So far, I have never been in a situation in which I require the data. So whenever I do SQL tuning, I do with no data. Okay? Because the way I tune is by the execution plan. So when I have this new plan that I need to be tested, then I prepare a script and I ask my customer to try the script, standalone. Okay? But all the playing, all the tuning happens with no data.
The only time that I had to ask customer for data is when the query was depending on dynamic sampling. There's no API to, at least to level 203 to feed the dynamic sampling. In my case, but in this case, there was a need for the dynamic sampling to be debugged. So that is what I needed, the dynamic sampling to work. So I needed the data to reproduce the issue. But those are very, very seldom appearing cases. Usually it doesn't need data.
Okay, so what I did here basically was like a demo the test case. How do we implement the test case out of SQLT? SQLT includes the test case. The only thing I have to do is take the test case and implement the test case. When I want to do the compare, it's the same thing. It's already there. I just need to bring over the repository, following the steps on the README, and I run the compare. So if you are saying you have production, you have development, you have the same SQL, different execution plans, and you want to know why, I may ask you to send me SQLT from both environments, and I take those two, bring over the repository, and do a compare, so I can see what is different. If what I see that is different, let's say is one index, I may tell you, you know what, you have an index mismatch here. You may want to try to create that index. Can I create the index here? Yes, I can create the index here. I can take the statistics from the system that contains the statistics for that index and put on my index, and I can prove or disprove. A lot of things I can do here on my test case. I don't need to go back every time and say, oh, try this. No. I try to avoid going back and forth saying, oh, try this, try that. If I can try it myself, I gotta try myself. Sometimes it takes more time just trying to explain what it is that we're trying to test than doing the test internally. Okay, I want to show you something else that is a little bit unrelated, but doesn't matter. I want to show you that. I am opening the same database from SQL Developer, right? Now, keep in mind, this file, the 5340, is a different database, different everything, different system. What happens if I take any piece here? Let's say I'm looking at this AWR session history, and I'm looking at this history, and I want to get this SQL. Can I take this SQL and execute this SQL on my local database? Does it make any sense? It doesn't make any sense, right? And get what? It's coming with data. And this data that you see here matches the data that you see here. How am I doing this? Everything is metadata. Yes, if I take this other piece that you see here, and I do the same, I take this SQL. That was an enhancement by Abel Macias. He asked me to do this. I take this piece, and I put it here, and execute. Yeah, I get all that data. Right? So, why do I want to do this? And second, how can I do this? Well, to answer the first question is, reports that they have so many pieces, it's very easy to go like huge report. So that means I have to trim the report. But there is not like a standard report that you can trim the tail of the report. You have to trim in every frame of the report has to be trimmed. So for example, here it's saying this output may include up to 1,000 rows. What happens if you have 3,000 rows out of the SQL? Well, I only include the first 1,000. What happens when you want to see everything? Well, if the report doesn't include that, then you open this up, you take the SQL, execute the SQL, and you can see all the rows unrestricted. Is that clear? So, but in order to do that, that means I need to bring over all the metadata behind your SQL, and that is part of the repository. So when we bring the repository, we bring everything that we need to produce this.
Which step from the which step in your test case build update those methodologies?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
So if you run a SQL in the new database, you still got all the data. That means you import it from.
It's part of the repository.
Into the repository, and also because you're accessing all the methodologies, that means you have to update the methodology.
No, I don't have to update the methodology because this SQL, the SQL that you see here, is based on copy of the $D views. Look at the name of the object. The name of the object, it says SQLT $GB active session history plan. So it materializes a view that is coming from the GB view. Yeah, so it's a table. It's actually a table. Is that clear? So if you say, okay, I don't know exactly what is included on SQLT, I'm going to show you here a trick. One of the files that we have are some log files. So let me find the log files. So if I open the log files, and the log files are included on SQLT, so you get to see what it is that you are sending to Oracle. In the log file, there is this file that says export, and this is the log of the export. This is going to tell you, table by table, what is that is exported. This is the repository. And all the SQLT objects, they have the SQLT prefix, but the name, DBA colon usage, DBA constraint, DBA dependencies, so you recognize this name. So that is the source. And this is the SQLT name. And these are how many rows we're passing. For example, for this DBA his parameter, we're passing 75,000 rows. So that means if I select from this table where a statement ID equals 53240, I should get that many rows. Let me just try it here. If I come here and say, select count time from SQLTXPLAIN where statement ID equals, and we're saying this one, which is 53240. 53240. I expect to see that many rows. 75658, which it should be the same as we have here. So everything that you see here is part of the repository. I give you the table, where it's coming from, and I give you the rows. If you want to see the content, it's just a matter of doing a select like this one here. If I need to do some data analysis or data mining on the metadata, I can do that. For example, let's say active session history may come with 20,000 rows. What I see here for active session history is only a few rows. So if I want to do an aggregate by object ID, for example, I can do that because I have the metadata. I don't have application data, but I have a lot of metadata. Okay? Questions?
Does SQLT installing it on production and then running it, creating the repository, does it impact the production?
Okay, that's a good question. If I install SQLT in production, do I affect the performance of production? Think this way. When you install SQLT, it takes a couple of minutes to install. It may take maybe 5 minutes to install. That is one time. You can do that during a maintenance window, right? SQLT is not monitoring anything. SQLT is just sleeping. It's doing nothing. It's just a tool that is installed, a bunch of little SQL packages, and doing nothing. When you run SQLT, it may take a few minutes for one SQL. That is process time. It is running, it's doing something. Once it finishes, creates a zip file and it's doing nothing. So the actual impact is a few minutes every time you run it. Okay? And it's not like it's going to take a few minutes of every CPU. No, it's just like any other program. Imagine SQLT is like a program that it may run for a few minutes. That's what it is, and it's pure SQL. For every SQL. Yeah, but you don't run SQLT like every 5 minutes. You run it for those cases where you want to analyze. Normally, you run SQLT for one SQL, I would say maybe once a day, maybe 3 times per week, maybe 5 times per month. It's not something that you keep using all the time. It's only when you want to analyze a SQL that is performing for them. Disable, yeah. You mean uninstall it? Or what do you mean by disable it? If I want to disable that SQLT user role that I have, I revoke the user role. If I don't have the user role and I try to run it, it's going to fail. Unless I am a DBA. DBA can override that. DBA can run it. But if you're not a DBA and you are a DB user and I revoke the command, it fails.
In production, we have a problem. The query is really complicated. When we run the SQLT, the main report, it takes forever to open. So we have to open the light version of it. What is the major difference between the two?
They're quite different. When you say you mean the main report is taking a long time to produce, or it takes a long time to open?
No, it's all produced, everything's fine. When I go to my computer, my laptop, it takes forever to open.
Use Chrome.
I try that, it takes quite a while.
Okay, let me show you something. When SQLT generates a report, it may be the report is big, right? So when the report is created, it goes through these steps here. Look at this part. It's saying the main report is coming back with 4 megs. The limit is 50 megs. So if it was more than 50 megs, it shrinks the report. So that means it's going to try to resize the report by scaling down all the lists by 50%. So if you saw that list that has up to 1,000 rows, it says, no, now generate the report again, but now the limit is 500 rows. If that fails, then it removes all the go-tos that you see on the report. If that fails, then removes this API that basically allows you to mouse over, to put the mouse over. If that fails, then it scales down to 0.25. And it's doing that 9 times. So it's trying to shrink the report until it fits less than 50 megs. Once I reach the less than 50 megs, I stop shrinking. Okay? The 50 megs is a magic number that says Chrome can take up to 50 megs. More than that, it may hang. So that's another, I don't know who asked me for this requirement, but the same issue. We have this huge report and very hard to browse. So I generate the report, exactly the same report up to 10 times, but shrinking, just to try to make it fit the 50 megs. If that still fails, send me the file, and I will investigate what's going on. Okay. Okay, those are the little things that I usually don't put on a conference unless I mean I have the right question, I give you the right answer. Yeah, SQLT has a lot of little things here and there that basically it's we have thousands of users of SQLT, and guess how many people we have supporting SQLT? One. Part-time. Part-time. Yes, so it's a challenge because if I'm not careful, I will have like several requests to fix something every day, and I cannot handle that. So it's in my best interest to reduce the number of situations in which I have to make a change because something broke. Okay? But that was a good point. Okay, so we have been jumping in SQLT. I showed you the test case, so it's time for me to go back to the PowerPoint and continue with the PowerPoint. We were here. So we were here on the PowerPoint. We said that for the struct we found the SQL ID, and you saw what it produces. The second method is execute. Execute, instead of passing the SQL ID, what we pass a script that contains the SQL, contains the binds, contains the SQL. So this method is going to actually execute the script and produce everything. The next method, extract and execute, combine these two, The next one is explain. I suggest don't use explain anymore. Why? Because of the binds. I mean, your SQL has binds, don't use explain. And the last one is extract standby, which is like an extract, but it works on read-only database. So if you have a read-only database, then you run this on the primary, it connects to the standby, grabs everything from the standby, and produces what you need. Okay? So those are the 5 methods. Again, the most popular one is extract. In terms of the output, there is an overlap. There is a common output. The explain provides some more information than the common output. The same happens with extract standby. Then extract and execute, they have a larger output, but they have an overlap here. But there are some pieces of the output they are only provided by execute, and some pieces of the output that is only provided by extract. If you want everything, then you run extract execute, which combine these two. Combine this one and this one, that gives you everything. But if you are beginning with SQLT, I suggest you stay with extract for some time. So you get to use to see what you get. Regarding the report, this report has many pieces. As I show you, we have a health checks, we have SQL text, init parameters, CBO parameters, cursor sharing, adaptive cursor sharing. The output of the tool advisor is also there. Execution plans. We have plan stability. If the SQL has a store outline, a SQL profile, or a SQL plan baseline, they're also included. We have ASH information. Performance about the execution of the SQL. We have the SQL monitor report. Anybody here uses the SQL monitor report? Are you guys seeing the SQL monitor report? Yes? No?
No.
No? Let me see an example, if I have an example here, the SQL monitor report. For the SQL I was showing you here, which is this one, this SQL, I noticed on this SQL I have a hint that says monitor. That is going to force the execution of the SQL monitor report, which looks like this one here. Have you seen this from Enterprise Manager? Not. Oh, let me change this. Let's fix now. So this is the SQL monitor report, and if you can see it from Enterprise Manager, you can see the execution plan in different ways. You can collapse some of these branches and open them up again. Regarding statistics, you can see steps that may be of some concern. It's very powerful, this report. Is this part of SQLT? It's not that it's part of SQLT, but SQLT also collects this report. So it calls the API, produces the report, and includes the report. This report, as you can see here, is standalone. I mean, you can just open the report and you have the report right there. So it's also there. We have the SQL detailed active report, which we can also see that. Where we can see for plan details, we can see different plans, and we can see the execution details for those plans, per execution, per role, activity summary. Many pieces, a lot of information here, which is collected by SQLT. So, questions? You guys may have some questions. No questions? Overall, okay. Let's continue here. So I showed you we have the SQL monitor report, we have segment statistics, session statistics, we have tables, meaning statistics for those tables, we have indexes, object dependencies, policies. If we have policies, like let's say you have a virtual private database, you get to see that. You get to see the policies affecting your SQL. You get all the metadata. You need to spend some time navigating one of these reports. I gave you some samples. On the file I gave you yesterday, there is a folder that says samples, and there are some samples for SQLT. You need to spend some time getting to understand what is that is included. In terms of navigation, I usually go here. I look at observations, SQL text, and summary. Those are my entry points. That's where I start looking around. depending on what I see there, I go to other places. So I always look at SQL text, observations, and the execution plans. Demonstration, I already did. I already showed you a report. And if tomorrow, if whoever is going to be in the conference tomorrow, if you attend my session, I will spend more time on navigation of these reports. I will take a couple of samples, and I will spend most of the time on the conference is going to be navigating through the report. Why? Because it's huge, and if you have never seen the report before, it's overwhelming. So it requires some time to digest different areas, what is that we look at, what is the meaning of every piece. And every time I explain navigation, I usually take a different path. Because it's so large that it's hard to say, I'm going to explain everything. That is not true. I'm going to explain whatever the conference is taking me. I mean, if I get some questions and people asking about ACS, I will focus on ACS. But it depends on what kind of questions I get. Anyway, let's talk about the health checks. Health checks. I have mentioned health checks. Abel mentioned, there is a question? Yes.
Yeah, so for sites that don't have the tuning pack and diagnostic pack, how much would you say that diminishes the usability of the tool?
Okay, if we don't have the tuning pack and we don't have diagnostic pack, I'm going to lose a lot of pieces. For example, anything that has to do with the history that is stored in AWR, I cannot show you that. But can I show you the history of the statistics? Yes, I can show you that. I cannot show you the history of the plans, but you can see the history of the statistics, right? Can I show you the history of the parameters? No, I cannot show you that because it's coming from AWR. So you lose a lot. To tell you the truth, you lose a lot. You want to add something?
Well, just
Go ahead.
well, the information that it is in the SQLT report is redundant in many parts. So it grabs information from so many different sources that have about the same information or correlated information. So I may not be able to look at the history, like I said, maybe I don't have the license, but if, depending on what is the objective that I'm looking for, maybe I don't need really the history. If I want to see the execution statistics, okay? I cannot see the SQL monitor report, but if I put the statistics level and all, and I run it, I will have the statistics the old-fashioned way. Or if I do the SQL execute, I will get the 10046. So I have the execution statistics. I may not be able to look at the active session history, but I have the wait events of the 10046, which is the next thing. So that kind of redundancy is what makes the SQLT also very useful. Because in support we have to deal with all kinds of situations in which the information is not available. So the more sources we pull it, that's why also we have two ways of, well actually three ways of generating a test case. And on top of that, the scripts there are three ways of getting those scripts, and the SQL one, the main report has also the DDLs from the scripts. Why? Because if one fails, one is not available, we pull it from another place.
Okay, and as long as we're on this thread, one other question. How successful have you been, and what caveats do you have if we're diagnosing something at a customer site in production? How much success have you had getting them to install and run SQLT?
I'm going to say 85% of the time the customer doesn't. The other 15%, most of them is because they don't know the tool and they are afraid of installing it. Because they don't know. That's most of the customers.
Yeah.
Other customers is because of change management. They are forbidden to install something regardless. So you cannot argue with the policy. Huh? And less than 1% of them, they had a bad experience and they don't want to do it. I mean, I have some customers say, no, I had a bad experience with it, so I don't want to do it. But after explaining them that the tool goes through several revisions and improvements, then they might give it a chance again.
Yeah, it all depends. I would say that answering that question, In my experience, that was able experience. In my experience, it's like, I would say like every customer installs SQLT. It's just a matter of time. When I say a matter of time, the first reaction is, no, we cannot install anything in production. We say, okay, let's work on development. Can you reproduce your issue in development? If the answer is yes, everybody's happy because we install SQLT in development and we can do everything there. If the answer is no, and if the customer is quite large, what I usually do, I offer to do like a 1-hour seminar, web conference, so I can explain what it do, what it does, what it doesn't do, how safe it is, the steps to implement the tool. Something like what I did here within 1 hour. And usually what happens after that, they say, okay, we're going to give it a try. And they try it in the test environment. Over time, they see the value, they move it to development, and then they move it finally to production. It may some time. It may take some time, but usually what they do is they take it. Sometimes they say, oh, we are a bank, we cannot do it. Guess what? The biggest banks, they already have the tool. Enterprise, so they're used to do. So it's just like, okay, you are a bank, and there are other banks that are using the tool. So it's like it's just a matter of getting to know the tool, getting convinced, how they can benefit of using the tool. And once they embrace the tool, it's a done deal. But it takes some time. There is a workaround to that. If we start with health checks, because that's a valid requirement. I had another colleague that is Mauro Pagano, you know him. At some point he said, you know what, sometimes we get this pushback that we cannot install SQLT in production because it installs many things. Can we get the health checks from SQLT without installing anything? And I told Mauro, you know what, Mauro, that's a lot of work, because it's basically duplicating everything that we have on SQLT on a different platform, meaning don't do anything on the database, just extract data, but don't mess with the database, don't install anything. And I say no, and then he convinced me through management, whatever. I say, okay, let's do it, okay? And that is the one here. Yeah, because anyway, that's a long story. So we have this health check part that can be executed standalone without installing anything. And that's what I'm going to talk here. Reasons to do health checks, we have many possible reasons. Health checks are basically your friends. When you do some health checks, they will come back with many observations saying, oh, by the way, you may have this situation, you may have this other situation. They are not like a straight pointer saying, oh, this is the root cause. No, they don't work like this. But they're going to tell you, oh, your statistics are bad because of blah, blah, blah. So they give you some heads ups. We do health checks global. We have some health checks that are for e-business, some health checks for SQL. There are different kind of health checks. But everything here is going to be centric to your SQL. And I already show you some samples of these health checks. What kind of health checks we get? Well, for example, the statistics are 88 days old, so that means they are outdated. Or we have some extended stats. Nothing wrong with extended stats, but you need to know that you have extended stats. Or, for example, this one here. You have an index that is being referenced on an execution plan, and that index no longer exists. What does it mean? Well, someone dropped the index, right? Those kinds of observations are important to understand. So, do we have to react to every observation? The answer is no. We only react to those observations that are important. The main question, can we get the health checks without installing SQLT? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. How do we do that? We take this node, and inside this node, we're going to find this script, SQL health check. When we run this script, it installs nothing on the database. It's going to ask for the SQL ID. And it's going to ask if you have the tuning pack or diagnostic pack. It's going to ask that. And after you do that, it goes on and on. And I think it's better if I demo this script. So I'm going to close this one here. I'm going to close this one. So I'm going back to where we have the tools. And we have the tools someplace here. I'm going to use the SQL Plus. I'm going to put it where we have the SQL health check. Okay. SQL health check is here, so I'm going to unzip SQL health check can be used. You can download SQL health check, or SQL health check is also included inside SQLT, but it requires no installation of SQLT. So I'm going to show you the standalone. I come here to SQL health check. I put my SQL Plus here. I open SQL Plus and I say SQL health check. It says, do you have the tuning diagnostics or not? Say, okay, I have the tuning back. Tell me the SQL ID of the one that you want to analyze. So, to give you that SQL ID, I'm going to find my SQL ID that I have been using for some time, which is inside tools, ID SQLT, and this is my SQL ID. This F, remember this is the one that I've been using, right? So I'm going to be using the same SQL ID. Could be something else, doesn't matter. When I do this, it's doing the health check. SQL health check is going to show me here in front of the screen, it's going to show me what is that it's doing. Why? Because some of these selects are coming from DB dollar bills, they may take some time, so you want to see what is that it's doing. Do you have a question?
Oh, so you have to do it assist, right?
This one I have to do assist, yes. Well, it has to do as a user that has access to the data dictionary. It could be a DBA. The application user usually has no access to many of these objects. And requires no installation. SQL health check requires no installation, creates no objects. This one DBA objects is going to take like half a minute because I have many objects on this database. So I know this one is going to take like half a minute. So what is that it's doing right now? Keep in mind, no installation, I just pass the SQL ID. That's it. And I'm going to show you what it is that it produces. At the beginning, when Mauro came with this requirement of having the health checks, and I said no, and then management came and convinced that I had to do this, the first version of SQL health check, it only produced health checks, nothing else. Over time, different people have gone say, okay, we have the health checks, but it would be nice if you include the execution plans. Okay, let's put the execution plans. With no installation, same. And then, okay, it would be also nice if you give me the CBO statistics. Okay, let's add the CBO statistics. It would be nice if you include parameters. Okay, and you know where it goes, right? So right now, what it used to be like one page report only with the health checks, now it looks something like this. Let me find that file again on the tools, SQL health check. I run SQL health check, and it produces this one file, zip file. It looks like SQLT, right? So I open this file, and when I unzip this file, what do I find inside? I find several files. The first one is health check. So if I open the first one, let me just close everything here. If I open the first one, it has some entries here which are basically the environment. What is the SQL ID, the signature, the host, the database release, the size of the block, blah, blah. And then, what do I have here? Observations. These are my health checks. Very similar to SQLT, but this is a subset. It doesn't include everything that we see on SQLT. It's a subset of SQLT. Well, I have several observations. Well, it wasn't enough. They say, okay, give me the SQL text. Okay, that is my SQL text. Give me the summary of the statistics for my table. What about the indexes? They are there. Fine, this one is pretty simple. I have SQL text, table summary, index summary. Well, you notice I have more files. The next file says diagnostics. And when I open diagnostics, this one comes with a lot of pieces here. So what do I have? If the SQL has baselines, it will come with an entry here. This case is coming empty, I have no baseline. But if I had a baseline, it will be here. I have profiles, patches, cursor sharing, and the reason to share or not share. No information, my cursors are being shared. I have a SQL statistics. It's history of the SQL statistics out of AWR. What else do I have? I have do I see execution plans here? No, I don't see execution plans here, but I see table columns, so I get the statistics for the columns, statistics for the index columns, I have that here. I have system parameters with non-default values, they are there. Then all the instance parameters. I have many pieces. What else do I have? Execution plans. I open this up and I can see my execution plans, I can see the outline, I can see the values of the binds. Okay? And it goes on and on with the multiple execution plans. What else do I get? SQL detail. This is the SQL detail report. Remember I showed you this before. For different execution plans, I get the details. I may get to see the execution plan. Right? For the different plans, I can get to see that. Okay? So there is a lot of information, and remember, it doesn't install anything. Remember this when I show you this DS, dynamic extractor. Everything that is related to this SQL, the same problem, I come here and extract with this one here. So the name is too long. So I get all those files, and these files, I show you this kind of before. So let me show it again, this HTML. On the HTML, I have all these pieces related to the SQL. If the SQL is coming from memory, this list contains by 3 times what you see here. I can see, I don't know, advisor statistics. I showed you the metadata before, but I can see SQL set binds. All these pieces that you see. Let me just check one that has some size. Advisor plans. I don't know. I don't even know what is this one here. DBA advisor plans. Those are the columns of this view, and this is the data of this view related to what? Related to this one SQL that I passed. Everything that you see is related to the one SQL that you passed. This is dynamic extractor that basically works like this. You're going to check all the data dictionary, and any view that has a column with a SQL ID becomes an entry here. And then for every one of those views, you're doing the select star from the object where SQL ID equals this value. And it gives you this on HTML, and it tells you the description of each column. So when you're looking here and you say, you know what, I see this column that says, I don't know, ID. So I can see the description of the column here. In some cases, it comes with an actual description of the column. Everything that you see is coming from metadata is dynamic. So that means you get this script and run it on a 12C. It's going to give you the new views from 12C, which may have the SQL ID. Is that clear? You run on 10G, it works. 11G, it works. The content is going to be adjusted according to what is your version of your database. Okay, so that's something new. That DX script is also standalone. So SQL Health Check uses the dynamic extractor. SQLT also uses dynamic extractor. But the dynamic extractor itself, it runs standalone. What does it mean? Just 1 second. What does it mean? I don't know if you noticed here, when we were looking at the health check, it came with these scripts. This is the health check script. Look at this one here, DX. What is this DX? That is dynamic extractor. I can run DX without running health check. And it's going to create the file that you saw here. It's going to create this one file that contains all those files. Let me just finish and then we go to questions. I show you this HTML, but I also have CSV. What is this CSV? If I open the CSV, Abel was talking about redundancy, right? Let me just show you this piece of redundancy. Open the CSV. What do I find here? Oh, I opened the wrong file. So there is I opened the global, but I was trying to open this one here. If I go by size again here, and I'm talking about this advice for SQL plans, it's going to be the same data the name is too long, the name of the file. So let me try to copy that file to some other place. Just give me 1 second so I can finish this part and then we move on. Okay, I have my data. So why do I care about having my data in two different formats? Because if I have an Excel, I can do graphs, I can do extraction, I can sort differently, I can do whatever I want. I have the data. Remember, this is not application data, this is just metadata. So I have more flexibility by having the data in 2 different ways, HTML and also CSV. Okay? Let's say you want to use the dynamic extractor to something else. Let's say you have this application which is centric to customer ID. So you want to use something like dynamic extractor, but instead of being like SQL ID, it's going to be customer ID. Guess what? You have here the SQL. So you just take this SQL, the one that says DX, open the SQL, and all the scripts that I create, they have my name. The reason they have my name is not to claim ownership. The reason they have my name is because if something breaks, I want to be responsible, okay? So they come documented, they say how it works. So if you can read SQL and PL/SQL, you will find the code is clean, it's easy to be used. It's easy to be reverse engineered. Why? Because I know that someone at some point is going to say, you know what? The idea, I like the idea, but I want to modify this script to, instead of be centric to one SQL ID, I want this to be centric to a customer ID, so I can use it with application data. Is that clear? The concept is the same. You just need to take this script, customize, and the script, this one in particular, is less than 1,000 lines. It's not that big. So it's doable to review this one, modify this one, and make it your own. Okay? Anyway, so I was on showing on the health check, I was just showing you the CSV files, which are here, part of the DX, the one here. And then we have some log files. I show you the execution plans. What is these log files? If I open this up and look at the log files, these log files are for the actual execution of the tool, and it's going to give you the ticket prof sort. Why do I care about the ticket prof of the tool? Well, because at some point you're going to say, your tool sucks, it's taking a long time. Help me to troubleshoot your tool. So I'm going to say, okay, send me the output. So I look at the output, and when I look at the sort here, I will see which statements my tool is executing, like this one here, that are taking some time. So I can see the execution plan and I can diagnose my own tool. Is that clear? So instead of going back and forth saying, oh, you have an issue with my tool, go ahead and create a trace file, then give me a ticket, everything is included. So just give me the output and I can tell you why this tool is taking a long time. Just some pieces here, some pieces there. So let me answer the question. You guys have some questions. Go ahead and ask me the question that you have.
So the SQL health, we can run the SQL health without the DX by a SQL execution, right?
SQL health check runs standalone. You run SQL health check, is going to ask you for a SQL ID. It installs nothing. If you don't want the SQL dynamic extractor, just remove that script. Don't put it on the same place, because if it is there, it's going to use it. Okay? Any other questions? You guys have some questions?
The dynamic extractor just get to the SQL.
Let me run the dynamic extractor itself so you can see what is the difference between these two. If I am here, the demo I did was with this one here. What happens if I open SQL here and I just say SQL DX? It's going to say the same question. Do you have the tool impact or diagnostic? I say, yeah, I do have the tool impact. and you're going to say, give me the output that you want. You can say HTML, you can say CSV, or you can say both. The default is both. So I'm going to say, give me both. And the last question is asking for the SQL ID. Remember what was the SQL ID? I never memorized the SQL ID. Well, the SQL ID is here. So I take the same SQL ID, right? Pass the same SQL ID. It's doing the DBA objects. So this is basically doing a subset of the SQL health check, and it's also a subset of SQLT. Just the extraction. So it's going to come back with a zip file that contains only the dynamic extraction. I don't know if it is kind of, okay, immediately confusing. SQLT is the big one that requires installation. SQLT includes many health checks and includes the SQL dynamic extractor automatically. SQL health check is smaller. It has a subset of the health checks, and it also executes SQL dynamic extractor, but installs nothing on the database. If you want to go even smaller, then you go with the SQL dynamic extractor, standalone, requires no installation, and it produces only one file that contains some zip files inside. Is that clear? But it doesn't give you any health checks. It gives you the core data. It's a dump of all the data that is related to your SQL. So this one is finished, and what it produces, this SQL dynamic extractor, is this one file that is here. This is the one that you just produced. If I open this file, you will see the same content. It has like 5 files inside, which are the HTML, several files, I mean one for each view, the CSV, log files, global tables, and also global tables in these two formats, CSV and HTML. Any questions?
SQLT also contains trace analyzer.
Yes.
So one SQLT is created all the trace analyzer.
SQLT is the big data.
Yeah,
Okay, contains everything. SQLT. That is the one that you want to use. But if you cannot install SQLT because it's production or whatever, then you move to use SQL health check. Okay?
And what triggered you to create a dynamic extract? So you have the health spec anyway.
Okay, the question is why I created SQL dynamic extractor. I was born a weekend, so I say no, the truth is, I was a little bit concerned about 12C. 12C is going to be released sometime, right? When we release 12C, we will have some extra views where SQL ID is part of the view. But I don't know what I don't know, right? So I don't know which views are that. So it will take me some time to find those views, incorporate those views into SQLT, blah. With SQLTX, I have to do nothing. You run this on 12C, and those new views are going to be included on the file. So I have like my backup plan. My backup plan is dynamic extractor is going to get those views, and they will be there. Over time, I will make those views part of the main report, over time. But in the short term, I have the data, I have the metadata, so I don't lose the metadata. You see? Also happens with new columns. If I have existing views, and let's say SQLT is reading from a couple of hundred views. If I have new columns on those views, the main report doesn't show those columns, but the DX will include those columns.
So is there a way that you can suppress certain items like trace analyzer or SQLT or something from SQLT while installing?
Yes. The question is, can we suppress some items? Not do installation, but actually you can say, don't use this piece. That is doable. That is through the SQLT parameters. Let me show you how it works. Let's say test case builder is taking a long time, because in reality it may take a long time. So what I do in those cases, let me just open any sample of one of the reports. If I look to SQLT Qtoon and I look at the sample I have here, let's say when I'm looking at the log file, I discover that the test case builder is taking a long time. I come here where it says tool configuration parameters, And all these are the pieces I can adjust. I have 60 parameters. I told you I had like 40. Well, actually I have like 60 parameters for SQLT. Any of these parameters, if I put the mouse over it, it's going to say what is that parameter for. Let's say, for example, I don't want to generate ASH reports. So if I put the mouse over, it says this parameter tells if we generate ASH reports from memory, from everywhere, or none, right? So I can see the different values here. How do I modify this parameter? The last line here, it says, how do we do that? Let me just open this up a little bit bigger so we can read that. It says, parameters, if we execute this API, passing the name of the parameter and the value, and the name is this name that you see here in this column, and the value has to be one of these values that you have, that change is going to be permanent. If you set this other API, the change is session level. Very similar to Metadata parameters, which you can make it permanent or session level. You can change any of these parameters. For example, trace analyzer. It says, do you want to execute trace analyzer inside SQLT? The default is yes. I can see that the default value is yes, but it takes yes or no. So I can say, no, no trace analyzer, you disable that. And you can do the same with SQL Monitor, SQL Tool Advisor, SQL Dynamic Extractor, the one that I just showed you. You don't like that, you want to disable that, you can just change the value to none. Okay? So you can disable many pieces here. Let's say you have partition objects and it's going to, you have 20,000 partitions for this table. You don't want to see 20,000 partitions. So these parameters like what is that I report, you can say, I want to see partitions, so I'm going to go global. I don't want to see the partitions. Is that clear?
It looks like this is after the fact, right? I mean, after you install.
After you install it, yes.
But I guess there is no way to initially self-curve a SQLT installation level itself.
No, and there is no really need. I mean, you install it, so the functionality is there, but if you don't use it, the way not to use it is by changing these parameters. That is easier than trying to control what it gets installed. So I install the tool completely, but then I don't use that functionality controlled through parameters. Okay. Any other question you may have? No?
I saw there the different events. One of the reports is 145. The other event is for the cursor.
The 10507. Oh, it says this one is to trace the currency feedback. You can turn this off by using this parameter so I don't get to trace. If you want to see the currency feedback, there is no view. For ACS, we have some views. For currency feedback, we have no views. Everything happens in memory. But when you turn this event on, you get to write into the trace file some information about currency feedback. So you can turn this on or off. And there are some other events, and I give you there the events that are also used by SQLT that give you extra information about hash joins, sorbet joins, and so on. And they are usually enabled, but if you want to disable them, you can do that. You have, for example, this mask for values. What is this mask for values? I don't know if you have seen this before, the mask for values. Let's say I don't include application data, but when I show you the low value and the max value for every column, and I show you the histograms, those endpoints, we can see those as application data, especially if the column is like Social Security or is salary. We don't want to show those. So we can mask them, meaning we can replace the value with some string. And we can use this parameter that says mask for values, which has different values. And this text explains which value we can use and what that we get. And so on. There are so many little things on SQLT that unless someone comes and say, how do we change this parameter? I don't even talk about this. The information is here. The syntax to change the parameters are here. But I don't go like one by one of these 60 parameters trying to explain what they do. Because in most cases, you don't need this information. But if you do need this information, it's available. Nothing is hidden. It's just there. How do you eliminate? No, the parameters are here. This is the list of parameters. But let's say